at Sleepy Eye, born and raised in Sleepy Eye, and I went to Wisconsin in 1970 trying to escape, but it's no warmer in northern Wisconsin than it is here. So I came back, and I spent 10 years teaching in Sleepy Eye. I grew up, as I said, and graduated from Sleepy Eye, so I was going back and teaching the kids I went to school with. And then I was a principal for a while, and then I became a superintendent, and I finished my career in public education over in Kenyon, at the Kenyon School District. In between times, when I wasn't in public education, I owned a newspaper. I published a hobby magazine. So I've done quite a bit of writing in my career, my life, or whatever. My goal was always to write a book. I could never really get zeroed in on what I wanted to have that first book be. And then one day I was ranting and raving in the kitchen about how much I hated winter, and my wife Rita, who was sitting back here, she says, well, why don't you write a book about how much you hate winter? So the result was the shiver runs through it. See if this, anybody recognizes this progression. It starts within a few days of birth. The hospital staff puts you in a dry diaper, lest a wet one freeze your butt, swaddles you in wool blankets, and kicks you out in the cold, huddled in your mother's arms like a soon-to-be frozen-legged lamb. Sure, you can feel the shock of 20 below zero penetrating the swaddles, but your face is covered against both the snowflakes and the 40 below wind chill. So you don't know you're going to be in Minnesota. At least not yet. But you cry anyway. By the time you've reached 2 years of age, you suffered through your first frozen fingertips, had your cheeks blistered red by wind chill, are well acquainted with the ritual of donning 3 layers of clothing in order to play outside, and have lost at least one snow boot, 2 pairs of mittens, and your favorite cat in the large snowbank that runs across the backyard. When you're 3, you realize there's something called a road on the other side of that big snowbank in the front yard. Snowmen are not neighbor kids who went outside without wearing 3 layers of clothing. And you can repeat verbatim the dozen curses your dad uses to start the car. When you're in kindergarten and the playground is littered with round little kids who've gone turtle and can't get back up on their feet because of the heavy snowsuits they're wearing, and your classroom smells like wet mittens and lost, sweat-stained stocking caps, you start getting the picture. When you're 8, you suddenly realize that every neighborhood father knows the same dozen curse words that your dad uses to start the car. And a few dads have an even larger car starting vocabulary. About the same time, you discover that your mom doesn't know how to start the car, or at least she doesn't know your dad's car starting vocabulary. And she really gets mad when you use one that starts with the letter F in front of it. By the time you're 10, you know how to shovel snow in a 20-mile-an-hour wind, how to use a heat pad on a sore back, how to thaw out frozen cheeks by rubbing them in wet snow, how to hitch up sled dogs, jump start a car, chip ice off steps, and throw a snowball with the accuracy of a major league pitcher. You can lick snot off your upper lip between sentences without stuttering. Now, who's going to confess that they did that when they were a kid? Or wipe down the back of your frozen mittens without the mittens getting stuck to your face. For your 12th birthday, you start growing that extra set of transparent eyelids that Minnesotans use to see during blizzards. Your feet start spreading out so you can walk on top of snowbanks instead of sinking into them. And your heart has a pulse rate of 125 in the winter and 40 in July. That's also about the time your science teacher spends a great deal of time covering cold-blooded animals. You're especially amazed by the picture of a Minnesotan standing between a turtle and a fish in your textbook. It's the first time you realize that Minnesotans are different than most human beings. When you approach 14, you can start a snowmobile, you call it a sled, with or without electronic ignition. Your Boy Scout troop has gone camping outside in January and only lost 3 toes, a couple of fingers, and 1 nose. You can swim through an avalanche, shop for your own long john, know the difference between thin slate and hollow fill, and you suddenly realize that girls look a lot more attractive in May than they do in January. Mostly because you can tell they're girls after they've taken off all their outer 2 layers of winter clothing. 16 means you now understand there are 2 types of antifreeze. The one you pour into your 4-wheel drive pickup, and the other you pour inside yourself. One you're old enough to buy, the other you aren't. You also start selecting girlfriends, not by how pretty they look in July, but by how many BTUs they radiate in January. You no longer shovel snow, but your dad bought you a snow blower for your birthday, and he lets you use it on the driveway whenever it snows, which is about every other day this winter. You've also mastered the dad language for starting cars in the cold. At 18, you're sitting in the high school counselor's office searching for any college south of the Mason-Dixon line, near a beach, and where snow is a 4-letter word. That's when your parents lay the bad news on you. They can't afford out-of-state tuition. They can barely pay the heat bill. Shortly thereafter, you discover their secret saving account for a winter vacation in Mexico, as soon as they pack you off to freeze in your Minnesota dorm room. As you scurry from building to building on your northerly, wind-swept Minnesota college campus, your shoulders hunched like Quasimodo against the cold, you suddenly realize that because of an accident of birth, you're screwed. You're doomed to spend the rest of your life cold, frozen, sunlight deprived, and your fingers clutched desperately around the snow shovel, saving whatever is left over from the heat bill to pay for your own Mexican vacation. You are now one of the chosen frozen, a full-fledged Minnesota. My first memory, we were talking about this the other day, we were visiting some relatives over at Sleep Bag. We were talking about the very first memory we had in the world. My very first memory is in this book, when I was about 3 years old, and all of a sudden it's like I just, I've been sleeping or something, and all of a sudden I came alert. I could sense things around me, and I remember that. I was stuck in a snowbank out in the front yard, up to my waist, and I couldn't get out. And I was crying, and I was cold. And I lost my boot down there someplace, and I couldn't get that either. And I don't remember how long I was out there, but I was out there a while. And then my dad finally came out and grabbed me by the back of the snowsuit and pulled me out of the snowbank. That's my first memory. And that's affected me ever since. I hated the cold ever since, and I've never gotten over that. And it seems no matter what I do, I can't quite get away from it. I was over here in New Ulm last February at the public library, and you guys had an ice storm. I come over here tonight for this, and you guys are having a snowstorm. So I'm thinking that, if you were guys are really sharp, and New Ulm people are really sharp, you would pay me to stay away. I figure if you'd slip me maybe $1,000 a month, say, December, January, February, I'll go to Arizona, and then you're not very welcome coming up here and making a weathercraft.